Imagine living in a country where your neighbor could be reporting on you, where a joke told in private could destroy your career, where a single book on your shelf could send you to prison, and where the government always seemed to know exactly what you were thinking. This wasn't a dystopian novel. This was the Soviet Union. And behind much of that system stood one organization. An organization so powerful that even today, decades after its official dissolution, its influence can still be felt across Russia and beyond. It was feared by dissidents, respected by rival intelligence agencies, and regarded by many as the most effective spy organization ever created. This was the KGB. For nearly 4 decades, the KGB served as the sword and shield of the Soviet state. It recruited spies across the globe, stole military secrets from its enemies, manipulated governments, crushed political opposition, and built one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks in human history. But the KGB wasn't just an intelligence agency, it was something much bigger. A secret empire operating behind the Iron Curtain. An empire that helped shape the Cold War itself. This is the story of the KGB, its rise, its power, its darkest secrets, and why many believe it never truly disappeared. Most people think the KGB appeared during the Cold War, but the roots of the organization go much deeper. To understand the KGB, we have to go back to one of the most important revolutions in modern history. Russia, 1917. The Russian Empire was collapsing. Millions were starving. The First World War had devastated the country, and public anger was reaching a boiling point. Then came the Bolsheviks. Led by Vladimir Lenin, they promised peace, bread, and a better future. In October 1917, they seized power. But winning a revolution is one thing. Keeping power is another. Almost immediately, the new government faced enemies from every direction. Former aristocrats, political opponents, anti-Bolshevik forces, foreign powers, and ordinary citizens who simply disagreed with the revolution. Lenin believed the survival of the new Soviet state depended on eliminating those threats. So in December 1917, he created a new organization, the Cheka. Officially, it existed to fight counter-revolution and sabotage. In reality, it quickly became the Soviet Union's first secret police force, and it would become infamous for something known as the Red Terror. The Cheka moved fast, very fast. Its agents could arrest people without trial, conduct executions without oversight, and operate with almost unlimited authority. Anyone suspected of opposing the revolution could become a target. Government officials, journalists, priests, business owners, even ordinary citizens. Fear spread throughout the country. By 1922, the Cheka had already become one of the most feared institutions in Soviet Russia. The message was simple. The revolution would survive, no matter the cost. And that mindset would remain at the heart of Soviet state security for decades to come. The names would change, the uniforms would change, the leaders would change, but the system itself would remain. In 1924, Vladimir Lenin died. What followed was one of the most important power struggles of the 20th century, and the winner would change the Soviet Union forever. His name was Joseph Stalin. Unlike Lenin, Stalin wasn't interested in sharing power. He wanted complete control. And to achieve it, he relied heavily on the Soviet security apparatus. The Cheka evolved into the GPU, then the OGPU, and eventually the NKVD. The names changed, the mission did not. Under Stalin, political repression reached levels the Soviet Union had never seen before. Millions would become targets, and an entire nation would learn what it meant to live in fear. By the 1930s, Joseph Stalin had become the undisputed ruler of the Soviet Union. But absolute power comes with a problem: paranoia. Stalin trusted very few people, and he feared that enemies were hiding everywhere, inside the government, inside the military, even inside his own Communist Party. Then in 1934, a shocking event changed everything. Sergei Kirov, one of the most popular politicians in the Soviet Union and a potential rival to Stalin, was assassinated. To this day, historians continue to debate exactly who was responsible. But what happened afterward is not debated. Stalin used Kirov's death as justification for one of the largest political crackdowns in modern history. The Great Purge had begun. Across the Soviet Union, people were arrested by the hundreds of thousands. Party officials, military commanders, scientists, writers, teachers, factory workers. No one was truly safe. Many were accused of crimes they never committed. Others were forced to confess under torture. Show trials became common. Verdicts were often decided before the trial even began. For millions of Soviet citizens, a knock on the door in the middle of the night became a symbol of terror. Some were executed, others disappeared into the Gulag system, a vast network of labor camps stretching across some of the harshest environments on Earth. By the end of the Purge, Soviet society had been transformed. Fear became a tool of governance, and the security services became one of the most powerful institutions in the country. While Stalin was consolidating power at home, another storm was gathering in Europe. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were preparing for expansion. By 1939, Europe was once again at war. The Second World War would become the deadliest conflict in human history. Tens of millions would die, entire cities would be destroyed, and nations would be permanently changed. But even during wartime, Soviet security organizations never stopped operating. Their mission extended far beyond the battlefield. The NKVD was tasked with maintaining internal discipline. Units were sometimes deployed behind Soviet lines to prevent desertion and enforce military orders. Meanwhile, Soviet intelligence networks continued gathering information from abroad. The Soviet leadership understood something important. Wars are not won by weapons alone. They are also won by information. And information was becoming one of the Soviet Union's most valuable resources. As the war approached its final years, Soviet spies were already working inside Western countries. Many of them would help shape the next great conflict, the Cold War. When World War II ended, a new global rivalry emerged. The United States and the Soviet Union had been allies during the war, but peace did not last. Both sides viewed each other with suspicion. Both sides feared the other's growing power, and both sides were racing to build the future. Nuclear weapons, advanced technology, space exploration, military dominance, everything became a competition. This was the beginning of the Cold War. In 1953, Joseph Stalin died. His death triggered a major restructuring of Soviet politics and security institutions. Several agencies were reorganized. Then in 1954, a new organization officially emerged, the Committee for State Security, the KGB. At first glance, the KGB looked like just another intelligence agency. In reality, it was something much larger. Its responsibilities covered almost every aspect of Soviet security: foreign espionage, counterintelligence, border protection, political surveillance, protection of state secrets, and suppression of internal dissent. Unlike many Western intelligence agencies, the KGB was deeply involved in both domestic and international operations. It was everywhere, and it knew almost everything. Or at least, that was the image it wanted people to believe. As the Cold War intensified, intelligence agencies became the frontline soldiers of a conflict that rarely involved direct combat. For the Soviet Union, that responsibility belonged to the KGB. For the United States, it belonged to the CIA. Both organizations operated in secrecy. Both sought to uncover the other's plans, and both were willing to take extraordinary risks. But the KGB had one major advantage: patience. KGB officers often spent years studying potential targets. They examined personal beliefs, political views, financial situations, relationships, weaknesses. Every detail mattered. A successful recruitment operation wasn't measured in days or weeks. It was measured in years. This approach produced remarkable results. Throughout the Cold War, Soviet intelligence successfully recruited individuals inside Western governments, military organizations, and intelligence agencies. Some provided information for decades. Others handed over thousands of classified documents. In some cases, the damage caused by a single spy would take years to fully understand. For Western intelligence agencies, the challenge wasn't just stopping Soviet spies, it was finding them, and that proved incredibly difficult. The KGB became famous for operating through layers of deception: false identities, cutouts, dead drops, encrypted communications, complex spy networks. Everything was designed to keep agents hidden. The result was one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations ever built. And for much of the Cold War, it worked. By the late 1960s, the Soviet Union appeared stronger than ever. The Eastern Bloc was firmly under Moscow's control. Communist governments ruled across Eastern Europe, and from the Kremlin's perspective, the system seemed stable. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to appear. One of those cracks emerged in a country called Czechoslovakia. In January 1968, a reform-minded politician named Alexander Dubček came to power. Unlike many communist leaders of the era, Dubček believed socialism could be reformed. He wanted greater freedom of speech, less censorship, a more open political system, and an economy that allowed limited market reforms. His vision became known as socialism with a human face. For millions of Czechoslovaks, it was a breath of fresh air. Newspapers became more independent. Public debate flourished. Citizens began openly discussing political change. For the first time in years, people felt hopeful. But in Moscow, that hope looked very different. To Soviet leaders, the reforms were not an opportunity. They were a threat, a dangerous threat. If Czechoslovakia succeeded in creating a more liberal version of socialism, other Eastern Bloc nations might demand the same freedoms. And if that happened, Soviet control over Eastern Europe could begin to unravel. The Kremlin needed answers, and as always, the KGB was called in. The KGB's first task was simple: find out what was really happening inside Czechoslovakia. Hundreds of Soviet intelligence officers entered the country. Some arrived as tourists, others posed as journalists, academics, or businessmen. Many operated under deep cover. Their mission was to observe everything: political meetings, student movements, media organizations, government officials, public opinion. Nothing was considered unimportant. The KGB wanted a complete picture of the situation, but gathering information was only part of the mission. The agency was also tasked with creating a narrative that would justify Soviet intervention. According to later reports and historical accounts, Soviet intelligence attempted to portray the reforms as part of a Western-backed conspiracy. The goal was clear: if Moscow could convince itself and its allies that foreign powers were secretly destabilizing Czechoslovakia, military action would become much easier to justify. The operation became one of the most significant intelligence campaigns of the Cold War. By the summer of 1968, Soviet leaders had made their decision. The reforms would not be allowed to continue. On the night of August 20th, hundreds of thousands of Warsaw Pact troops crossed into Czechoslovakia. The operation was known as Operation Danube. It was one of the largest military interventions in post-war Europe. Tanks rolled through city streets. Airports were seized. Government buildings were occupied. Communication centers were taken under control. Within hours, the country was effectively under Soviet domination. And throughout the operation, KGB officers played a critical role. Some had already identified key political figures. Others assisted in securing strategic locations. The agency helped coordinate intelligence, communications, and political control during the invasion. The military may have provided the force, but the KGB provided the eyes and ears. The Prague Spring lasted only a few months, but its impact would be felt for decades. The invasion sent a clear message to every country inside the Soviet sphere of influence. Political reform would be tolerated only as long as it did not threaten Moscow's authority. For the KGB, the operation was viewed as a success. The agency had gathered intelligence, identified potential threats, supported military intervention, and helped restore Soviet control. But outside the Eastern Bloc, the invasion severely damaged the Soviet Union's international image. Many people who had once admired Soviet socialism began questioning it. The dream of socialism with a human face had been crushed beneath the tracks of Soviet tanks. Yet for the KGB, Prague became an important blueprint, a demonstration of how intelligence operations, political manipulation, and military force could work together to achieve strategic goals. It would not be the last time they used that formula, and the next time it would happen even farther from Moscow, in a country called Afghanistan. By the late 1970s, the Cold War had spread far beyond Europe. The United States and the Soviet Union were competing for influence across the globe. Africa, Asia, Latin America, every region had become a geopolitical battleground, and few places were more strategically important than Afghanistan. Located at the crossroads of Central and South Asia, Afghanistan sat in a region the Soviet Union considered vital to its security. For years, Moscow had worked to strengthen its influence there. But by 1979, the situation was spiraling out of control. Afghanistan's communist government was deeply divided. Internal power struggles threatened the stability of the regime, and Soviet leaders feared they were losing control of one of their most important allies. At the center of the crisis was a man named Hafizullah Amin. Officially, Amin was a communist leader aligned with Moscow, but inside the Kremlin, many believed he could no longer be trusted. Some Soviet officials suspected he was pursuing his own agenda. Others feared he might move closer to the West. Whether those fears were justified remains debated by historians. But one thing is certain. The Soviet leadership decided that Amin had to go. And once again, the KGB was given a critical role. The operation would become one of the most daring missions in KGB history. Its code name was Operation Storm 333. The objective was simple: remove Hafizullah Amin, replace him with a leader loyal to Moscow, and secure Soviet influence over Afghanistan. On December 27, 1979, Soviet special forces in KGB units launched the operation. Their primary target was the Taj Beg Palace, Amin's heavily guarded residence overlooking Kabul. The palace was protected by hundreds of soldiers. Many had been specifically trained to defend the president. The attackers knew they would face fierce resistance, but speed was essential. The assault began. Gunfire echoed across the palace grounds. Explosions rocked the compound. Within minutes, an intense battle erupted. The fighting was brutal but brief. By the end of the operation, Amin was dead. Many of his guards had been killed, and Soviet forces had successfully seized control of key government facilities throughout Kabul. The mission was completed in a matter of hours. From a tactical perspective, it was a remarkable success, but the consequences would prove far more complicated. Following the operation, Soviet leaders moved quickly. A new government, headed by Babrak Karmal, was installed. Moscow expected the situation to stabilize. Many Soviet officials believed the intervention would be short, a few months perhaps, maybe a year. Instead, they walked into a disaster. Resistance spread rapidly across Afghanistan. Various insurgent groups united against the Soviet-backed government. These fighters would become known as the Mujahideen. What began as a political intervention soon transformed into a full-scale war. And that war would last nearly a decade. The Soviet army was fighting on the battlefield, but the KGB was fighting a different war. Its officers were tasked with identifying insurgent leaders, building intelligence networks, interrogating prisoners, monitoring local populations, and conducting covert operations. The KGB attempted to penetrate resistance groups, recruit informants, disrupt supply lines, and track foreign involvement in the conflict. But Afghanistan presented challenges unlike anything the agency had faced before. The country's rugged mountains made surveillance difficult. Tribal loyalties often outweighed political ideology, and local fighters knew the terrain far better than any foreign force. Even one of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies struggled to adapt. As the years passed, the war became increasingly expensive. Thousands of Soviet soldiers were killed. Many more were wounded. The financial burden grew heavier. International criticism intensified, and morale inside the Soviet Union began to decline. For many observers, Afghanistan became the Soviet Union's version of Vietnam, a conflict that seemed impossible to win, a war that consumed resources without delivering victory, and a struggle that exposed the limits of Soviet power. By the late 1980s, Soviet leaders were searching for a way out. The war had become unsustainable. In 1989, Soviet troops finally withdrew from Afghanistan. The conflict was over, but the damage had already been done. Operation Storm 333 demonstrated the extraordinary capabilities of the KGB. The agency had successfully planned and executed a regime change operation in a foreign country. Its special units performed with remarkable efficiency. Its intelligence networks operated at an impressive scale. But Afghanistan also revealed something else. Even the most powerful intelligence organization in the world could not control every outcome. Winning a palace was one thing, winning a country was another. The KGB had helped launch the intervention, but it could not prevent the war that followed. And in many ways, Afghanistan marked the beginning of the Soviet Union's long decline. A decline that would eventually lead to the collapse of both the USSR and the KGB itself. For most people outside the Soviet Union, the KGB was known as a foreign intelligence agency, a shadowy organization that stole secrets, recruited spies, and battled the CIA across the globe. But for millions of Soviet citizens, the KGB meant something very different. It wasn't a distant intelligence service. It was a constant presence, watching, listening, monitoring, and sometimes punishing. Behind the headlines of the Cold War existed another mission, one that rarely made international news, maintaining control at home. And for decades, that mission touched nearly every corner of Soviet society. The Soviet government viewed political dissent as a threat to state security, and the KGB was responsible for identifying that threat. The agency maintained an enormous surveillance network. Informants could be found almost everywhere: factories, universities, government offices, military units, even apartment buildings. Citizens never knew who might be reporting information to the authorities. A coworker, a classmate, a neighbor, sometimes even a close friend. This uncertainty created an atmosphere of fear. People learned to be careful about what they said, careful about what they read, and careful about whom they trusted. In many cases, the fear of being watched was almost as powerful as surveillance itself. One of the most famous critics of the Soviet government was Andrei Sakharov. Ironically, Sakharov had once been celebrated as a national hero. He played a major role in developing the Soviet hydrogen bomb. But over time, he became increasingly concerned about human rights and political freedom. He began criticizing government policies, speaking publicly, writing openly, and demanding reform. The Soviet leadership was not pleased. Sakharov faced years of harassment, surveillance, and restrictions. His story became symbolic of a larger struggle taking place across the Soviet Union, the struggle between state control and individual freedom. From the Kremlin's perspective, these measures were necessary to preserve stability, to protect the state, to defend socialism. But for many citizens, the cost was enormous. Careers were destroyed, families were separated, lives were permanently altered. The KGB became one of the most powerful institutions in Soviet society because it operated at the intersection of intelligence and political authority. It did not merely gather information, it helped shape the boundaries of acceptable thought. And for decades, millions lived under that reality. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet Union was facing a crisis. Its economy was slowing down. Public trust was fading. And after nearly 4 decades of Cold War competition, the cracks inside the Soviet system were becoming impossible to ignore. Then, in 1985, a new leader came to power, Mikhail Gorbachev. Unlike many Soviet leaders before him, Gorbachev believed the system needed reform. Not more control, not more repression, reform. His policies of glasnost and perestroika promised greater openness and economic restructuring. For many Soviet citizens, it felt like the beginning of a new era. But for many inside the KGB, it felt like the beginning of the end. The organization had spent decades protecting the Soviet system. Now that system itself was changing, and not everyone was willing to accept it. Then came August 1991, a moment that would change history forever. A group of hardliners within the Soviet government launched a coup. They believed Gorbachev's reforms had gone too far. They feared the Soviet Union was collapsing, and they were determined to stop it. Gorbachev was placed under house arrest. Military units were deployed. The future of the Soviet Union hung in the balance. But something unexpected happened. The people resisted. Thousands gathered in Moscow. And standing at the center of that resistance was a man named Boris Yeltsin. Climbing onto a tank, Yeltsin called on citizens and soldiers alike to reject the coup. His image quickly became one of the defining symbols of the Soviet Union's final days. Within just 3 days, the coup collapsed. The hardliners failed, and with them, the KGB's reputation suffered a devastating blow. The failed coup accelerated everything. Republic after republic declared independence. The authority of Moscow evaporated. And by December 1991, the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist. One of the most powerful superpowers in human history was gone. And alongside it disappeared the organization that had spent decades protecting it. The KGB. Officially dissolved, officially finished, officially history. Or so it seemed. The KGB no longer exists, at least not by that name. Its headquarters still stand, its files still exist, its legends still survive, and many of the people trained under its system continued serving in the organizations that replaced it. The Soviet flag may have come down from the Kremlin, but intelligence never disappeared, power never disappeared, and the methods developed during the Cold War never truly vanished. For decades, the KGB was feared across the world. It recruited spies, toppled enemies, protected a superpower, and silenced countless voices. To some, it was a shield. To others, it was a weapon. But regardless of how history judges it, one thing is impossible to deny. The KGB wasn't simply an intelligence agency. It was one of the most influential institutions of the 20th century. A machine built to protect an empire. And in the end, when that empire collapsed, even the machine could not save it. Because no intelligence agency, no matter how powerful, can stop history forever. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into the world's most secretive organizations, intelligence agencies, and historical events. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.